Welcome to Within WordPress, the podcast you want to be listening to if you want to learn all about the people making up the WordPress community. On today's show, we have Joshua Wold as our guest. Hi, Joshua. Welcome
Hey,
to the podcast.
thank you. Glad to be here. It's good to be chatting.
We'll be chatting for sure. So please introduce yourself and what it is you do with WordPress.
Hi, I'm Joshua. I'm a designer. I've worked on WordPress with contributions in the past, and right now I'm helping companies improve their onboarding in WordPress and just enjoying that.
That's I think that's a very small introduction for something that's quite big that you do. Introducing onboarding to companies. Is that? Can you give me an example of what that looks like? Because I kind of know what that looks like, but for
Well,
those listening and watching,
yeah, the idea is when someone first tries out your software, they have a sense in their mind of what they're trying to accomplish. They know who they are. They're hoping to get something done. Usually they're busy. So the first time they press the activate button on a WordPress plugin, for example, they're trying to get their website faster or they're trying to get a form on there. And you have a couple of seconds to either exceed their expectations or disappoint them.
mm,
And when
that's a
I've
good
built
one.
my own software in the past, I immediately get blinders to those expectations. So I'm able to come in and help a company with a new perspective and say, here's what customers are likely to feel, and here's the emotions they're going to walk through for those first couple of seconds. And we have a chance to hold them. Or if they're the wrong kind of customer, we can quickly show what the software is for so they can opt out because there is some customers who are not going to be beneficial for your software. So
Mhm.
it's actually a lot of fun. I'll do this kind of a teardown of software where I'll offer a gentle roast. Someone's probably gonna be disappointed right now. They're
A
probably gonna be
gentle
really
roast.
upset. So and my goal is to lift up companies by improving, not just destroying, but I call it a teardown. And when in any software, there's always opportunity to improve. Any software I've ever built, I can show it to a friend and they'll point out something that I just missed. And that's what I'm offering to companies. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, yeah, that's a good explanation. You're calling it a teardown, but you're essentially trying to uplift whatever's there or not there.
Yes, yes. And we have a lot of really awesome products in WordPress, and I think what happen we may talk about this, but what happens in an ecosystem that is different from others is you kind of diverge a bit. So we have certain expectations and unique things about us as a software platform that
Yeah.
in the mobile app world, the SaaS app world, I'm seeing differences. And there's opportunities for us to improve based on what they're doing out there. But also we have a uniqueness we don't necessarily want to lose.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a good example of product blindness, I guess. One of my long-standing issues with uh, yeah, any plugin theme, whatever you add to your WordPress site, as soon as you do, where's the settings?
Yes.
How do I configure this to my needs? Or what if I have I don't know, 15 different options to choose from, and which mix is my mix? I'm always baffled by why this is not solved within WordPress. Coming from having been a long time, so I think I'm on Apple products for about 15 years now. Before that, that was Windows. And when you installed something new, you had that installation wizard that you
Yes.
clicked through, and there were options, there were choices. And when you were done, you kind of knew what you had said. And for some reason, we never did this in WordPress, and I'm baffled by it. Are you
There
solving that problem?
in most cases, most plugins will benefit from an installation wizard. So I am suggesting that when I'm working with them. I'm saying ideally we probably want to set one up to walk someone through in design, you'll call it a happy path or in product management, you'll call it a happy path. What is the typical use case that someone wants to do when they're using your plugin? Let's help them do
Yep.
that. And then we'll show the doors for other things. And that's best accomplished through a wizard. And I remember the old Windows days where I'd go through a wizard and I kind of knew what the software was about to bring. that is
Yeah.
not the only way to do it. It's not that we must do this way, but it's often an improvement over nothing. Well, when
Yeah, yeah,
someone
yeah. Oh,
activates a plugin and nothing happens, that there's this abrupt moment of uncertainty, and that's not ideal when it's a plugin and you're trying to offer them help.
yeah. But and I mean it in a literal sense. When you activate something, you are quite lost if there's nothing presented afterwards. And I don't mean the little pop-up thing that says, "Hey, subscribe to my whatever."
Yeah.
But I actually mean like, okay, is will I find this under tools? Will I find this under settings? Will I find this under dashboard? Because there's some will inject them over there. It's just weird how this is not being solved. So you say you come from a background as a designer. So how did you make this sort of switch?
I That's been a
Is it a
while now.
switch?
It it's an evolution. I started in graphic design and visual when I first got out of high school. I was starting to go to college, and I got an internship as a graphic designer at a screen printing shop.
Mhm.
Someone would say, "Hey, I've got a T-shirt with something on it, Joshua. Can you make graphics in Illustrator?" So it's actually really fun to just work with visuals, get them on a computer. But then I discovered something called the web. I'm not that old, but I kind of knew about it. And I started tinkering with websites, HTML and CSS, and realizing that you can just do so much more if it's not locked on a t-shirt or some printed product somewhere. And over time, I've tried to get closer to the software, to what people are actually going to experience. So that's led into working on applications, working on the web, working in WordPress. And then this is a journey designers will often follow. They realize they don't understand any language of business, and they get this frustration of, "Why are we not being heard? Why are we not being listened to?" And I
Yeah,
realized part of the problem is me, so I've tried to learn more of how businesses have to operate to succeed, and that's led into onboarding, conversion rates, attribution, acquisition, all these things, and frankly, I'm having fun with it because a designer can improve software if they're working with the right leader and the two of them together or the group of leadership together are trying to accomplish something. If a designer is 10 levels down in an organization, you're not going to make too much of an impact. Don't worry about it.
yeah,
Just have fun.
yeah, yeah. That's a difficult one. I think I think I kind of recognize what you're saying in terms of a lot of products are built by developers because they see a need or because they have an annoyance or anything. That need is solved in code, and the result of that code is some sort of integration within WordPress, right? Maybe that's
Yep.
just front end, maybe it does something, doesn't need settings, but most oftentimes it does. And yes, we have a settings API and you can create that little page and all of that. But usually the idea is just it stops from the moment the problem is solved, done. Um, but then there's the rest. Yeah,
I,
that's a big rest.
yes. And when I've done front end development years ago, I don't really do that much anymore, but there's this moment of I've launched something, I'm done, I'm exhausted. I've already put out all this effort. So to ask me to do the equivalent of 2, 3 times more than that, it's pretty overwhelming. Not to say developers can't do this. Some are fantastic. They're able to
Oh,
put on a
absolutely.
hat and think through this. Um, but if you can't, let's say that you're a developer and you say, "Well, I can't afford someone else to help me with this." Here's a couple of things you can do. One, show it to people who kind of fit who this is for, but haven't seen it yet. Just get on a 15-minute call, offer to
Hmm.
buy them a gift card and say, "Hey, I know this software has problems. I'm excited for you to tell me all the things wrong with it. And let me just record you talking for a little bit." If I've found if you do that with 3 people, that'll often uncover the biggest problems and will encourage you to go work on it some more. So this does not have to be some overwhelming big capital D design endeavor. You can just get out of your head, talk to a few other people, and find big ways to improve it. And something you'll realize is they might say, "How do I find your plugin? What does it even do? How do there's 20 buttons you got in the settings screen. Which ones do I turn on? Which ones do I turn off?" And those kind of things will encourage you to just start making improvements. So it's absolutely something you can do on your own.
Yeah. It is, and I think at this point we have to say it is a mandatory thing to do. Um, as unnatural as that may be for some to seek out feedback, right? Again, they've solved it. It's working.
One of the chief product officers I worked with a couple of years ago, what I loved about his approach is he did not come from a design or a product background. He came from a data analytics background.
Yeah.
And so, because he understood that, what he would do is he would constantly just look at other this was outside of WordPress, he'd look at other apps. He would have thousands of screenshots on his phone as he's just looking and understanding patterns and
Yeah.
seeing how does someone else do their onboarding. So that's another thing you can do. Just go look at 10 other WordPress plugins and you'll start to get in your mind this ideology of, "Oh, I hate how they're doing this, but I love how they're doing this," and that can kind of
Yeah. Yeah.
trickle into your thinking.
Yeah. Yeah, it requires a mindset of wanting to solve it for not just your itch, but the whole gamut, the whole array of any type and kind of user. Um, when we were building software back, this is more than 20 years ago, before I started my WordPress career, but when we were building software for an HR department for a large insurance company, we quickly learned that the way we thought was not the way they thought, which is awesome feedback at the at the beginning of the project, not so much at the end. And you burn once, and then okay, let me try and fix this better. So yeah, seeking advice was the solution.
I've gotta share a story from my let's say earlier design career. I was working on some software and the CEO of the company came up to me and he was like, "Joshua, who is the user of our product?" And I'm like, "Oh, well, it's the customers, the 500 customers who are using this that we're trying to build for. And they are the ones that will help us to modify it and will get the da, da, da." And he just puts his hand up. He's like, "No, let me cut you off. It's not them. It's me because I pay your salary. So we do whatever I want. You will design and build whatever I think and I like." And that just struck me, and helped me realize I probably was gonna do better having a job somewhere else, so I started looking and did my
Yeah,
best while I could. And this understanding that the product was only gonna modify based on his wants and desires, not based on the 500 people who were already using it, that they were almost not considered at all, which had an effect on the software. The software
yeah, of
was never
course.
gonna be able to get to a certain level because of that.
I thought you were going to go with the story. I thought you were going into the direction of where he would say, "Oh, no, it's for the 5,000 next customers we're going on board with." Not even
There
that.
there were never 5,000. I think it stopped at that.
Oh wow. Yeah, yeah. So yeah, the whole expectation, who is my customer, who is my end user? That's an interesting one. So if we look at WordPress now, um, you've done some breakdowns, right? Teardowns
Yeah,
of onboarding, and you shared a couple.
yeah.
So, um, I'm kind of curious, what kind of stuff do you encounter? Like, obviously, the example that I gave, just activate and nothing happens. Uh, that's probably the worst. Um, what are some other interesting examples of like good try, but doesn't really help, or you know,
W So this is an easy one I'll call out because it's used to be a massive flaw of my own. You'll see a lot of plugins try this tooltip, uh, wizard, for lack of
yeah,
a better word, where they'll
yeah,
say step 1 of 5, click up here, click down here, and it'll black out the screen and have these little tooltips pop up all around. And the general advice for well-designed software is that we should actually move away from those now. What it's doing, it's helping a user see a very rigid system, and they can't possibly imagine all the use cases when they're just seeing little arrows here and there. So instead, it'd be better to remove all of them and have a short YouTube video. If you can't do anything else, if that's the simplest little thing you could do, just say,
yeah.
"Hey, watch this 5-minute video where I walk through it," and then let them figure it out on their own. And then there's lots of things you could do beyond that to build a happy path to make sure that they're seeing one focused thing at a time, but that'd be the simplest fix. Uh, Another is
That's a good fix.
go
If
ahead.
I so the I've never liked those pop-ups, and I find them annoying
Yep.
beyond anything. I think I remember the Monster Insights by Awesome Motive. it still has the pop-ups even after, long after
Ah,
you've used it. It keeps sending you reminders and stuff. And if there was a filter that would just disable all of them, please, somebody listening, let me know, because it's not just me that I would make happy, but being able to quit that and just figure it out on my own works way better for me, truly
yep.
understanding what the software is doing. I'm happy to hear that that's a consensus we're reaching, all of us now. But indeed, 5-minute video, you can do the world in 5 minutes.
Yes, just walk through it and at least I'll know. I'll probably ignore that video, but if you make it available for me to find later, that's another
Yeah,
principle I've thought of. Just make it easy reach so that if I start to get stuck, I'll watch that first.
yeah, yeah, really good one. So what else? I interrupted you. So
We have a challenge in WordPress. How does a plugin suggest that someone should start paying for it? And
mm,
just last night or the night before, we released a filter on WordPress.org for commercial versus community
yep,
plugin.
yep,
And I was kind of playing with it a little bit to see how this would help or could help. And some plugins that are fantastic and have a paid option are so afraid to even talk about it that I don't even know there's something better for me that as a
yeah,
user, I would happily give you $50, $100 to solve my problem, but I can't even see how I would do that. There are other plugins that will not stop reminding me the entire time I'm using your free plugin that there's a paid option.
yeah,
And there has to be a balance between those 2 for users to really be able to enjoy what you're building. And outside of WordPress, on let's say the iPhone mobile app space, this has been solved in a decent way. There's always opportunity for improvement,
yeah.
but it's when I'm ready to use a power feature, I know that ahead of time with the label and I see, oh, this is about to help me. I click on it, I get the paywall, and then I go through that. There's opportunity for us to improve that in WordPress. And there's some plugins that I think maybe this developer is so hesitant. They could probably improve their business. They could probably get more sales by being a little bit more open with that in a helpful way.
Mhm.
That yeah, it's something I'm starting to investigate, and I think more businesses can grow if they can figure out this balance.
Do you have an example of a plugin that solves this really well, like right on the balance of not too much and definitely visible when you want it?
Yes, there's one I love. It's a very simple one. It's called All-in-One WP Migration. I'm forgetting the exact name, but it's by Serve Mask.
Yeah,
And the free plugin does something hilarious. It limits your basically, if you're trying to migrate a website from one server to another, that's the purpose. And I've had to do this many times.
yeah.
And it allows you to zip up, I'll just say zip up your website and move a file around. When you're uploading to the new website, it does this hilarious thing. It's like, hey, just a heads up, as long as it's up to 64 megabytes, you can do it. Technically, that's possible. Some websites are 64 megabytes, and I've done that. I've even gone through once and
That's
removed all
way
the
since
attachments so that I could
yeah,
do it. But then finally I got tired of doing that and I saw, oh, maybe it's $50 at the time I could solve this problem. I was happy to fork over that $50. I felt that it was a genuine helpful plugin. And at the time I was ready to pay, they had that little prompt and I've used it for many websites since then. That was a free to paid upgrade that I felt was just really well handled.
so inside the actual action, there's a small mag that says, "Look, there's only 6 that you can do
Yes.
64. You want more? Unlock, and we'll happily, send
Yes.
your way,
And
send you your
that's
way."
a very fair trade-off.
Yeah,
Candidly, 128 would be more websites, but I technically did use it for a while for free if I was willing to do the extra work, and that's a good way to think about it, that if someone's open to manual work, free can take care of them, but if time is more important, then pay me $50.
interesting. Yeah, yeah, so you're essentially saying hijack it in a nice way where it makes sense to, solve whatever mini problem you're having within the solution. Yeah. I
Eh
my example would be, I like what Yoast SEO does in it shows premium in the menu. When you click on it, you'll see there's redirections and there's some other stuff there. I care for the redirection mostly. I like how they make it clear that we love to help you, but for this particular function, you're going to need to upgrade. And it
Yes.
does it because it catches a 404 that you created, right? You deleted a post. And it then says very gently says, look, this is going to cause a 404. You probably want to solve this better. Here's how you can.
I
Similar in terms of interrupting your pattern, but in a upgrading, hey, this makes sense in a way.
I haven't run across that specifically with the 404s, but I love that because it's the moment that I need it, you're calling it out. And Yoast also,
Exactly.
they have a nice little banner that's not annoying, that's always on the side that says, if you want to pay, here's what you get. That's a
Yep.
really elegant way to handle both sides of that.
Yeah. Yeah. I know a lot of people bash Yoast SEO for how they're doing things. I think there's always a lot of it is a little bit of hate of here's a popular plugin already doing really well. Do they need to do even better? You know, that sort of sentiment is always involved. But no, I like how they guide you in you're making a mistake here. Let me help you fix it. We're going to ask a little compensation because we've solved it more than a little bit
The
for you.
There's a podcaster I follow, Ben Thompson. He's ranted about this a little bit that if you have a business, granted, this is different than if you have truly a community focused plugin that you have no interest in. There's a separation. But if you have a business, he's commented that his customers would be happiest if he was free all the time, if he did not charge for anything whatsoever. But
Sure.
there's going to be an inherent tension between trying to build a business and what your users want. And
Yeah.
he's found a nice middle ground where I pay him $12 a month and I get access to his podcasts. I'm happy to do that. And to the extent that he continues to give me value, I'll be happy to pay that. Would I be happier if it was free? Of course I would. But then he wouldn't be able to take care of his family. So I'm okay with that trade off.
Yeah. It is a balance. It's always a balance between fixing an annoyance, running a business, offering something for free. It's a lot to juggle, if I'm honest. And I think that if you look at the WordPress ecosystem as a whole, for years there's been a tendency like if you want to make money here, this is not the place. Yeah, it is because um, what are we on now? 43% of the most popular websites. That's ridiculously high number. So that means there's a huge market. And if you're going to do it, you might as well do it in the best and the most optimized way. You mentioned data driven. Um, how would you how would you determine whether one option over another option is the best way to go?
Well, first of all, it's WordPress, so that's hard by
Yeah.
default. I I've thought about this, and I'm trying to figure out what's ways to advise people. I was talking to one developer, and he's like, "I have no data whatsoever. What's the best way for us to go forward?" Um, and I'm starting to just ask around because I don't know all the technical limitations. So I'm still learning. And if you have any insights, I'm definitely open to this. I've seen some plugins, they ask, "Hey, would you mind if we track some data because it'll help us to improve it? You can
Mostly
opt in.
powered by
Here's."
Freemius.
And
Okay.
see, that's interesting. I want the data to be used to help a developer improve, not for third-party tracking. That's what I would love to see more of, where
Yeah.
this will only be used because this is a paid plugin, and we just want to understand how to better serve you. That's what the kind of prompts I'd love to see more of. With that said, in the absence of that data, you can look outside of WordPress and see principles that generally apply for software where they do have tons of tracking. You can
Okay.
generally see that if you, I'll take the mobile app world, a long onboarding flow is generally not a problem. We saw about a 3 to 4% drop off from screen 5 to screen 20 in one of these apps that I was helping to build with the long onboarding process.
Yeah.
So as long as it's the right customer and they know what you're about to offer, you can take them through a lot to customize their offering. You're probably not going to lose them. The
Out of
next,
curiosity, what is
yeah,
that app solving a big problem or a small
it's
problem?
it's a small problem. It's helping people take care of their indoor plants with watering, fertilizing, reminders.
But high
So
emotion and
they care deeply about it. They're very
yeah.
emotionally invested in it. Yeah.
I think that's an interesting factor to keep in mind as well. So it depends on what you're actually building. Are you building a convenience or are you solving a pain point?
Yes, vitamin versus Band-Aid, it's one of the great
Yeah,
questions
yeah,
in
yeah,
design. Yes. The other thing is if you so Nielsen Norman Group, they're this design research group. They
yeah,
have a saying that if 6 people give you feedback and you record it or observe it, you will capture about 80% of the problems of a given task that you've asked them to review.
yeah,
And beyond that, you'll get diminishing returns. So 20 people does not help you solve 100% of the problems. It's not worth it to spend more time. And if roughly they give a data point, if roughly every 6 weeks you do this, you will uncover a lot of challenges. I will give a caveat. This is not for version one of a software. It's for follow up iterations after something is already launched.
yeah,
That a user group does not help you create a product, it will help you refine it.
yeah.
With with that way of thinking, I've even shortened it a bit more where I just try to grab 3 people really quickly to find, let's say 40 to 60% of the glaring issues, then come back a couple weeks later and do it again. In the absence of data, that's a great way to kind of shortcut through and figure out if this is serving someone.
So I mentioned Freemius as one of solutions I see used most in terms of collecting data. Like how is that? How's the plugin actually used? What's happening inside of actual usage of the various settings and option pages and whatnot? Is there a solution there other than Freemius that you're aware of? Like, if you're building a plugin or a theme or really anything that will allow you to collect data, like usage data?
I'm not aware of one, and I would love to know because I love to be able to recommend it to people if it's generally a good option. Um, and actually, I had misheard. I thought you said like freemium model plugins. So
No,
Freemius,
Freemius.
I'm gonna look them up and see if they're
So
helpful.
it's a solution that I think it's originally built to help you go from free to pro. So it helps you with a whole bunch of stuff, uh, upgrading, collecting data, all sorts of things that you actually want from going from free to pro. I haven't used it myself. I've looked at it. I think I have a general idea of what they're trying to solve. It, for instance, also adds, which is a feature I don't particularly like, it adds an option that when you turn off that plugin, it will come up with a pop-up first asking you why you're turning it off. I think I I understand that that's valuable data. I just think I find it annoying as hell. Uh, but
Have you ever wanted to answer it, or have you just wanted to type a bad answer to
well, you
for
have
the
to
model?
click another times telling like no or I don't care to share or something like that. There's like 5, 6 options, and then at the bottom there's the option that I don't care to share. But it's an extra step. And in the process that I'm already finalized on, I don't care to jump into that one. But having said that, they provide data, and for those answering those sort of pop-ups and all the usage inside of the plugin, it's a very valuable what it provides. But again, it's very specifically geared towards going from free to premium.
I would be curious to learn more about that because we did see, for instance, on this mobile app, it was really helpful to understand where we were losing people. Oh,
Yeah,
half of people we had this area on the plugin that I think 23% of people would try to tap on. There was no button there. It was just a little open space,
interesting.
and
Felt like there
we
needed to be a button.
it's like they were expecting there to be a button right there, and that
Yeah,
kind of insights can be quite helpful to a product team.
yeah, that's an interesting finding. That's one of the things you can catch on the screen. Not necessarily inside of WordPress, but that's an interesting finding. They want to have a button there. They're not, what are they
Yes.
solving? Are they trying to click out of it or progress or something like that? Yeah, interesting. Um, when you do these teardowns, what does that process look like? So how do you, from a perspective of you, you're rarely a new user, at least not on the WordPress side of things. So you already have sort of expectancies. So how do you prepare for that? How do you prepare yourself to be as a blank canvas as humanly possible? 'Cause that's got to be a challenge.
There's 2 things I like to do. One, I think every human likes to tell stories and likes to hear it. If I say, "Let me tell you a story," we've actually seen that the brain goes into a different mode of listening and thinking. If you've ever been at a WordPress conference or a talk or a church where the moment someone starts to tell a story, you're just locked in. Uh,
Yeah.
I approach these that I want to tell a story. I'm not doing some kind of a boring evaluation. I'm not doing an analytical breakdown. I'm trying to pretend that I'm a hero on a journey trying to accomplish something, and I'm gonna see if I can get that done.
Yeah.
And that immediately puts me in the mind of being in a fictional universe with this plugin. It's a way of kind of tricking myself. The other is I put on blinders. I will only look at a screen for about 2 or 3 seconds before I close my eyes, I decide what I'm gonna do and what notes I'm gonna take down, and if I didn't see it, I pretend it's not there. I've
Interesting.
I've done a teardown and I've realized I missed a tiny button that solved a huge problem I had, but I
Yeah.
leave it in because I didn't see it in about 2 or 3 seconds, which kind of matches what's gonna happen with the user. So, I'll take
Yeah.
Yoast, for instance. I did a teardown of their software. I have used it for 10 years, right? I know it intimately. But in that moment, if I'm only giving myself a couple of seconds, I'm gonna not remember everything, and I'll just make a decision which button to press, and then I take a
Yeah.
note down. So
Yeah.
it's actually have a lot of fun with it that way.
Oh, interesting. So you have found a mode to get yourself into blank mode.
Yes, yes,
Yeah. Yeah.
and people who build product, whether you're a designer or a developer or product person, you often get into that because you do have a lot of empathy for people wanting to experience and use software.
Mhm.
And you have a way of making yourself an empathetic person who maybe thinks like a 5-year-old or thinks like a first time user. So often folks of that type of career path uh, can fake it a little bit and pretend that they haven't seen something.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Okay. So I was making this way harder in my head because I'm trying to think of something that you go into fresh, right? You kind of have to be fresh. There's not that much room in one's head to be fully fresh. So, but I hear you're saying you're not actually fully fresh. You're just starting with a let me see what's going on here type of
Yes.
attitude, and that'll be as fresh as it needs to be.
And the first idea I have, I write that one down. Because
Yeah.
sure, I you and I may know that this software does these 20 things. What's the first thing that comes to mind? Let's just use that one for the teardown. And it often helps to simulate what a new user might feel when they come there. What big button stands out the most? What picture
Yeah.
grabs your attention the first?
So when you do these teardowns, so I would imagine this: once you've installed it, activated, that's when the most um, relevant information is being presented, right? So that's the actual teardown. How much are you incorporating the here's the data in marketing speak on their website, on their plugin page, and then from there to installing, obviously that's default for everybody. But then from the from the marketing to the actual activated plugin, do you take that into account if there's a mismatch or if there's like I can imagine you testing something and you don't still don't fully understand what it's about to do, what it's capable of.
There's two approaches I've taken. For a couple of products, I've said, I've come to your marketing website. You make me a promise. I'm going to go through with the whole plugin and see if that promise is fulfilled.
Hmm.
Other times, I pretend I'm in the .org repo and I want a plugin that's SEO. The first thing that pops up, I'm going to compare it against a couple others, and then I'll just see if they fulfill a need that I'm seeing, not based on the promise of their marketing website. So sometimes I'll do one, sometimes I'll do the other. And the I lean more toward the latter just because that's an entire problem to solve.
Yeah.
Solving the marketing problem, that's something that I may spend a little bit more time on in the future, focus on. But there's so many other aspects of how does a person first come there? Why are they there? What are they trying to do? For me, I want to first see if I can improve their onboarding. Then there's a lot of other aspects we can look at, or someone else can help with.
So onboarding, um, the teardowns that you do and the service you provide, is that mostly geared towards WordPress plugins, or do you do services as well?
I do services as well, just because I've worked on a so to be, candid, I've done a lot of just service work for WordPress companies in the past, and what keeps happening is you end up doing an onboarding flow. That just happens.
Yeah,
You work with someone long enough, and I saw enough patterns, I realized I could focus specifically on this. It's not to say I won't do other stuff, but this is a really fun problem I wanna solve right now. And if
yeah,
we work together on onboarding, naturally, we'll start looking at other parts of the platform as we evolve and as we try improve that.
yeah,
Um, because once you get past onboarding, every product team knows you need to then think about your conversion rates. You need to think about
yep,
retention. You need to
yeah.
think about these other things. And that's something I can help with. But if you don't get them in the door first, then you can't think about them staying.
You running a business is hard because
It's
just by the things that you list, that I mean, for the most part, that's those are problems any business needs to solve. Because building a product, while it's not easy, it's also not hard in terms of once you define the problem, there's a gap between what is and what is not. That delta is your solution. Um, Relatively straightforward. But then getting them there, so it starts with marketing. Then the conversion from the marketing uh, pages to actually installing it and using it. And then once they are using it or installing it and activating and optimizing that onboarding, but then there's onboard, then you're on board. And then the next step comes, how do I keep them happy? How do I keep them using it? How do I keep innovating? It's a
something that
long list of stuff that you have to take care of.
something that helped me. This was the chief product officer I worked with in the past. He had a good way of thinking about it. He's like, Joshua, in this period of time, for let's say the next 3 months, we could pull one of three levers: acquisition, activation, or retention.
Yeah, that makes
Acquisition
sense.
is getting people into the door through marketing, activation is getting them into that aha moment of using your software. And then the last one is keeping them there.
Yeah,
Don't try to pull all three levers at once because what you'll find is you pull one and you get an improvement, you're going to see a decrease on the other. So
yeah.
just work on one at a time, and over time, you can improve all eventually, but don't stress all 3 at once, you will overwhelm yourself.
Smart advice. I would agree with your manager. Yeah. So with the onboarding, you focus on a small portion of using the software and where the software is WordPress itself. Have you looked at onboarding of WordPress itself, or specifically onboarding solutions? There's one particular solution I'm thinking of that solves the whole onboarding to WordPress. Is that an area you have dived into as well?
I've not been diving into it with this project, but I have been thinking about it a lot, just being part of this ecosystem for a long time,
Yeah,
because I'm sure this happens to all of us at some point where a friend asks for a website, and you immediately go through the logic of, all right, domain
it's
name,
how a business starts.
host provider, which theme builder should I put them on, or which theme should
Yeah,
they
yeah,
have? What
yeah,
plugins do they need? And frankly, I'm open to ideas you have because this has been a little overwhelming to me still to this day with how do I walk someone through that and not.
yeah,
I had a friend that I basically said, hey, let me log in and buy your domain. Let me set you up on a host provider. I'll then put on a theme for you, and then you're ready to go. Before that, don't worry about it. You'll be too stressed. So,
yeah.
yeah, what have you seen?
So I've seen Extendify, and Extendify is essentially a solution. I think it's mostly geared towards hosting parties, but it's a solution that that essentially is being put in front of WordPress. So it stops being the famous 5 minute install, but for good reasons. So instead of just installing it and then you see that horrible dashboard with widgets that make absolutely zero sense to
Yes.
you, because what am I doing here? Um, Extendify has the option to say, once you've installed, that's just the beginning, right? The next step is asking you, what are you going to do with your site? So if my goal is to run a e-commerce site, it automatically installs WooCommerce. But not just that, it automatically installs the right type of plugin so you can actually have people pay your products. So it might ask you if are you going to sell physical products or not, or do you need taxes to be calculated, that sort of thing. But if your goal is to have a membership site with a newsletter and build extra, I don't know, upgrades or any of the kinds of stuff that you see nowadays, it sort of guides you through that. And the end of that onboarding wizard is you have a WordPress that is geared towards the goal that you started with. And I like that. I like that principle a lot.
I was looking at their marketing site, and the premise of what they're doing feels right. I haven't worked with the software specifically to know if it's
Same,
hitting all the
same.
right points, but what the story they're telling and connecting with the host provider, it means if your host provider offers it, in theory, your users might have a much simpler flow to get to the actual problem they're trying to solve.
Yeah. I think what I ideally would like to see is that much of what they're solving now inside their entire suite of solutions, is that much of what they're doing should be moved over to WordPress itself. So that famous 5-minute install, maybe we've seen the best of that, and kind of move on from there, going from installing it and then actually asking the same question. So what Extendify also offers is an integration with whatever control panel the hosting company has, right? So data is being fed in there and back and forth, and makes fully makes total sense to fully have that automated and geared towards hosting companies, because one of the largest pain points of hosting companies is the retention.
Yeah.
They may figure out how to install it and they have the site, but then no action done. So a year, 2 years, and then they just because they didn't start um, beyond the first step. So I'd love to see the more of that inside of WordPress, and I think the overhaul of the dashboard is something that is going to happen at the same time.
It's not friendly the first time you come there. It
No.
doesn't really inspire you to do anything in particular, and you bring up a good point that the host providers can be a partial solution to this,
Mhm.
where if the moment I wish I could tell a friend, "Just go to this one spot and you'll be done,"
Yeah, yeah.
but instead I have to tell them, "Well, actually get your domain separate because you don't wanna lock that into a host provider and run into those problems."
Yep.
Then, in this current calendar year, this host provider is probably gonna be the one that's kind of okay for you.
Yeah.
And there's a lot there.
Same with the mail and same with, all the little things that go with that domain.
Oh, yeah, and guess what? Your WordPress site won't actually send any emails out unless you also install a plugin or have your host provider set that up. It's all these
Yeah.
little things that there's an inherent tension between closed and open software, and we embrace and accept that open software is the solution that has made the web grow so well, so
Yep.
we're not throwing that trade-off away, we want that. But what that means is you will never be able to lock things down to the extent that something like Squarespace can, right? Where
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
entire vertical stack is controlled. And as long as we understand the challenge, we can still find ways to improve it and make it better. And that should be our goal, to not say, oh, well, it's open, let people do whatever they want. We can still give guidance and suggestion and improvements to walk people through that.
I think we need to say it's not that we can give guidance. I think we should. I'm very careful by using the word should, because I don't think there's not should has some sort of force in it, right?
Mm.
I am forcing you to do it. So I use it carefully. Should is, I think we're at the time where we should start saying we should improve that, because the end result is, yes, while we may not be able to replicate Wix and Squarespace and all of those providers, there comes a point where we're going to have to make it smarter to start using WordPress. Um, and I know this from just, friends and family using WordPress maybe 4 times a year. And every
Mm.
single time they do, I get a text like, I forgot the login. And that's where it starts. So this is the location. Okay, great. I'm in. Remind me how because I'm kind of lost. I don't know where to start. And all they're doing is writing a a little blog post or a update or simple stuff. But the whole dashboard, the whole arrangement of content, the whole, and I'm going to say something that most people probably think I'm being paid for, but uh, there's no entity to pay me. So, but the block editor, or formerly known as Gutenberg project, I would probably still name that way. The result of it is the block editor that we see. I like it.
Mm.
It's smooth. Yes, it needs better UX here and there, but if we just start explaining this a little bit better, people are just going to have a lot more fun with it. But the whole, how do I get there, and having to answer those questions for clients and friends and whatnot, I've like long ago defaulted to creating onboarding videos for every single new client that I have. Every single one of them gets a video of me, 5 to 10 minutes talking through. So the only thing they have to do is go back to that video, and there it is. So when clients ask me now, and no, sorry, I should say friends, when friends ask me now, I force myself to do the same thing. Okay, well, I'll happily answer you. We'll do that on a Zoom call, but I'll record it and I'll make it available to you afterwards.
I
Problem
had a
solved.
moment this week, and I'm not sponsored by them or anything like that, where I just wanted to create a simple little marketing site. And someone on Twitter mentioned it, and I remembered I'd used it a while back. Cadence, they
Yep.
have a bunch of block patterns. I installed it. I saw the block patterns, and I immediately felt this sense of relief that they had 30, 60 block patterns that mostly solved anything a marketing website could need, and they
Yep.
looked consistently the same. The design was not different button styles, not different colors and fonts,
Yep.
and
Health native.
I I saw a block I wanted, and guess what? It had a little label that said "Pro," and I went and immediately paid the 60 or $70. I was so
Yep.
happy to pay it, and that's an example where I love that someone has spent the time to create a bunch of patterns that all fit together. And then I told another friend yesterday, we were on a call, and I'm like, "Hey, just use Cadence. You'll be fine.
That's
Pull
how
it
it
into the
works.
block editor, use Cadence, and you'll be able to get your
Yeah.
marketing website up in a couple of hours." And
Yeah.
it shows me some possibility and gets me excited.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. I've used Cadence on 2 sites, mostly because they solve a specific need that that site needed. And they're very close to the native
Yeah.
block editor. Um, Maybe a little bit more intrusive than I would like it to be, but I guess that's the trade-off. And I upgraded in a similar fashion. It solved the problem that I was looking to solve. Happy to spend money here. Move on. It's saving me time, and it's not something that I needed to overthink necessarily. So here you
That
go. Exactly like you said.
I love I wanna pull on that point a little bit. We have something we call the WordPress way when it comes to doing
Yep.
plugins, themes, etc. And I understand it, acknowledge it, and mostly reject it when I'm actually building software because that's become a limiter at times to anything
It
that's
has.
innovative.
Yeah.
I in the past, I worked on a pretty popular WordPress plugin, and we ran into this challenge of we were trying to build within the existing design system, and we were not able to innovate whatsoever. And we finally got permission from someone, which could have been ourselves, but someone's like, "Hey, just go build whatever you need to build, and then we'll worry about integration later." Because
Yep.
sometimes you have to break the established pattern to improve it. Other times you'll see some plugins, they've gone maybe too far, too crazy, and it doesn't fit at all. But it's okay to be a little bit pushing the boundaries to try and build good software.
Yeah. I fully agree. And again, and I've worked there, so this may sound like I'm overly enthusiastic and or whatever still. But Yoast SEO with their latest dashboard revamp, love it. It's just straightforward. Can we please make the whole dashboard look like that? Like it's sweet, it's simple. Maybe a little bit more contrast here and there, but it solves the problem that I have. Like I need a double layered navigation, right? I don't want to have everything be a hover. Uh, it 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 it's just nice to look at. It feels nice, and gosh, it's been a while since I've been able to say that about the WordPress dashboard. Um,
Well, and the WordPress dashboard visual design language was I remember when we shifted over, was it WordPress 2.1? When it went from the vertical, the horizontal
MP6?
navigation,
MP6
yeah,
is the project called.
MP3. I was just a user at the time when I saw the shift, and I immediately was excited. I'm like, "This is better."
Yeah.
But
Yep.
that's how many years ago was that now? 2005?
Oh, no, 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 it's, yeah, possibly. 2.7, I think it was. Wow. We're dating ourselves here, aren't we?
And the point is, like, that was an incredible breath of fresh air. It was innovative at the time, but we also can't just sit on that. We've had
No, and we've been sitting on it for way too long now.
yes, improvement has to happen, and that's where in full disclosure, I got to work on Gutenberg a little bit, and I'm talking a handful of tiny, tiny little tickets where I was able to like improve
Mhm.
things. But I do think Gutenberg is a huge success. I love how it works. I'm able
I
to
agree.
just point friends to it and say, "Hey, just add a block here." And now that we have patterns coming in,
Oh,
I think there's a lot of opportunity.
I love patterns. I love patterns. It's so smart. It's just, it's such a no-brainer. The only thing we may need to solve in patterns, probably at some point, is how do I change the text inside the patterns? Because some of those patterns have text in them. Most people don't find that very intuitive yet. Other than that, it's just like I've played around with Ollie, the Ollie theme by Mike McAllister. It has like 50 patterns in it, 50, 50.
Ooh.
And I just kept adding them and just playing with them, and like the ease that it is to just to make have an author bio type stuff, or have a testimonial, or have, you know, he's got those examples in there. Play with the headers. It's just click. Nah, not what I want. Oh wait, this is almost what I want. Change a little bit here. Bam, I'm done. It's so much easier to play with your theme. So I do wonder at what point we actually stop calling it a theme and just a collection of design
I
elements.
think
We're getting close.
we can do that when there's enough patterns that can have a consistent look and feel, right? If I have 50, and I'm gonna check out the Ollie theme, I'm excited about that. If I have 50 patterns that solve 90% of what a marketing website needs, I don't need a theme at that point.
And Mike's working on a pro. I'm really keen to figure that one out. But and there's a few more block editor themes that work. Full site editor, site editing. It's confusing, the name. But the whole future of WordPress is something I'm excited about, and I particularly like your place in it in terms of helping improve something that is like, do the math on the amount of plugins you install on a week. If you're actively building sites, that is,
Yes.
when you're playing with it, when you're upgrading it, when you're all of these things that we don't really think about, but we're doing it all the time, and we are annoyed by it all the time, or we just shut down because, you know, you're being annoyed. So you don't like that. You ignore that and you just do what you need to do because you can't figure it out anyway. But we're end users with a lot of experience.
A-
Most people are not.
And someone shared this with me a while back that you're not, even if you're a power user, you're not always a power user. What if right now you've just got a couple of seconds, you're annoyed, you're busy, you've got to run off and pick a kid up from daycare in 5 minutes. You
Mm,
just want to do something very quickly. And there's a plugin that I'm talking to a developer about, and he suggested it, which really excited me. This idea of there's 50 possible settings with this plugin. What if when you install it, we say typical use case 1, press this button. Typical use case 2, press this button. And I'm genuinely excited to work with him on that plugin because he gets that, he sees that value, and
yeah,
I'll just help, like, tweak that as we go to get along the way. And if I'm super busy, I'm like, "Oh, yeah, use case 1, that's gonna be perfect for me today, done."
exactly. I love that idea. Same. Absolutely love it.
So this is why I'm excited to improve, help people improve, work on this. It's a lot of fun, and better plugins, we're all gonna be a little bit happier, right?
Yeah,
If
yeah.
I Yoast, fantastic team, I have no affiliation with them, but I did a teardown, and they immediately said that they were gonna put some changes into the roadmap to improve it right after they saw it. Like, that fulfills me when I'm trying to help improve, other plugins.
Yeah. And ultimately, that is what open source is about.
Yeah, I'm not an expert in this, but I've been following it a lot. This whole OpenAI learning models, right? You have
Yeah.
ChatGPT, you've got Bard, and then you have this open source movement, which is apparently, according to Google's little internal letter, which there's reasons we don't know if we can trust it, but it's interesting. Basically saying, like, open source has the opportunity, and it's in their best interest to say that. But point being, open source has the opportunity to iterate faster because you're not counting on 5,000 employees with red tape all getting sign off before they're able to ship a change.
Yep.
Instead, you have maybe someone, a developer who's so inspired by something, they just submit a pull request. Someone else sees it, they approve it. You can just move so quickly. And that is the part of open source that I love, and it will never be beat by any closed source software as long as there's certain principles we're thinking about in terms of how good software should be built.
I think that's an excellent point to end the show.
It's
Thank you
been
so
fun.
much, Josh.